Welcome to episode 18 of The Wellness Connection with Fiona Kane. I'm Fiona Kane, and today I'm going to be talking about a couple of bits and pieces in the news and some general musings, I suppose. Some of the things I'm going to be talking about that are in the news are should doctors talk to their patients about weight loss? And the other one is artificial sweeteners because they're back in the news again. Are they safe? Should you be using them? But before I get there, I want to just talk about some sort of general musings. I always learn things when I'm in consultations with my clients, things come to mind, and I wanted to talk a little bit about. I know in some of my previous podcasts, I have talked to you about boundaries, and I've talked about boundaries and managing healthy boundaries and how that's important, why that's important for your health and for your relationships. And one of the things I just wanted to touch on, though, many of us have people in our lives, and I've seen this with quite a few of my clients lately. We have people in our lives, whether it's a partner or a parent or might be a boss or whoever it is, but someone in our lives who is a very strong personality, and it's a personality type probably that I would call a narcissistic type personality. So people who have very, very strong needs and kind of want you to be kind of attached to them and available to them all of the time, and people who take a lot of energy. And there are people in our lives, like sometimes if there's people like that in your life, maybe they shouldn't be in your life. But sometimes they are people that you really love and you want them to be in your life. But you've just got to learn how to manage your boundaries around them. And I talked a little bit about that in a previous podcast where I did talk really specifically about boundaries. But I wanted to go further from that and just say that in situations like that where and actually not even just situations regarding boundaries, I would say situations regarding spiritual growth, emotional growth, when we're learning about emotional intelligence, when we're just as human beings growing as human beings, all of those things, it's really, really important to understand that you're not going to reach a level of perfect and you're not going to get everything fixed. So, for example, with the boundary example, I see it a lot with people and their parents. And what happens is people someone will put up a boundary and it will be respected for a while, or they'll have the energy to maintain it for a while. And then something happens and that person crosses their boundaries, pushes their buttons, and essentially that it causes a lot of either pain or yeah, a kind of what's the word for it? What's the word I'm looking for? Basically, it's like pushes their buttons and kind of activates an emotional response and kind of they have a reaction to it. And sometimes I find that when I'm talking to clients about these issues, they feel like if that has happened, that somehow they've failed or somehow they haven't fixed it. I thought I'd fixed it. How come I haven't fixed it? I see the same thing just in general in, like I said, in wherever it's spiritual, emotional growth, that kind of thing. Anyone who thinks that they're there, that they've made it, they're in this, they've reached the place, and the place is a spiritual awakening and they're so sensible and grown up and really got it all sorted now. They're emotionally sorted now. Anyone who thinks they've made it to that place, spend a little bit of time with your family of origin. You will soon have your buttons will be pushed by then. All have a challenging time in life, right? So it's very easy when we're kind of in moments in our life. I always talk about like the calm between the storm, because life seems to happen in, you get waves and you get storms, and you sort of get a lot all at once. And then what we'll have is if we're lucky, we'll have calm moments in between. And in the calm moments in between, it's very easy to be so spiritually aware, so easy to be so balanced and so in charge of your emotions and have it all sorted and all figured out until the next storm. And then you'll find out how much you have figured out. So what I'm trying to say is that we're all human, and while we all have want to grow and learn and all of that sort of stuff, growing and learning and developing healthy boundaries and creating a healthy sense of self and all of those spiritual growth and awareness stuff, it is like peeling back an onion. It's all the layers. It's lots and lots of layers of it, and you will never be there, and it'll never all be fixed. What you'll do is you'll just deepen your understanding, you'll deepen your knowledge, you'll deepen your experience and your wisdom about things. Doesn't mean you're not a human being, a human being that can't be triggered and can't sort of suddenly act like a 2 year old or a 5 year old or a 12-year old or whatever it is, right? So when we get triggered, or where we perceive that, oh, we've failed, and then the same thing happens, I've talked about before with, whether it's sort of be on your way of eating or your exercising or any kind of health program people are doing. We perceive that we're doing well and we've got it all figured out and we're doing the right thing, and we've got it all right, and then as soon as we don't, we somehow, oh no, I failed. You are a human being having a human experience in a really confusing world, to put it mildly, right? So it is okay that you don't have it all figured out. It is okay that it's not perfect. And if you get triggered, it's just an opportunity for growth. It's just an opportunity for learning. And it's a reminder, I think sometimes too, it humbles us, because what I've learned over and over in life is you do get humbled. Whenever you think you're a bit good, you get humbled. And life reminds you that you're just human like everybody else. And so it's okay to have a humbling experience. It's okay to be reminded that you can act like a 12-year-old or a 2-year-old with the best of them. It's okay that you get triggered sometimes. It's not about being perfect or becoming perfect, or fixing, because you can't fix other people's behavior and you can't fix what's happening in the world. The only thing you have control of is your response to it. So you can't fix every situation. You can just manage the situations, manage your energy, and manage your response to the situations. And so when things flare up, when you get triggered, when things happen, you haven't failed. It's just life. That's part of life. So I think that if we set up our goals for one day, it'll all be sorted and I'll have all the ducks in a row and it'll all be fixed and it will all be better. That's not the real world. That's not life. So when you when you have an acceptance of, there's a certain level of stuff you have no control of. There's a certain level of stuff happens. There's a certain level of change and challenge that you just have to learn how to deal with it, right? And the one thing we do know about life is change is the only constant, right? We kind of think constant, oh, we've got this constant, but no, change is really the only constant. So really, as I'm sure I've talked about before, it's about your ability to be flexible. It's about your ability to just maintain overall your mental, physical health and well-being. Do the best you can in the quiet times between the storms, between the waves. Just have an acceptance of a level of imperfection, because it's always going to be there, and you'll always get little reminders that you're human, and that you can fail or make mistakes sometimes, or that you know people are challenging and you're doing your best, and today is not a good day, and that's okay. So just sort of just it's been a real theme this week with my clients. So it's funny how I have themes with my clients sometimes, and that's been this week's theme. Um, so it's okay to have a certain level of acceptance around stuff that you can't control, and then gently and kindly manage yourself around that, but be kind to yourself around it. You haven't failed if you get triggered or those sorts of things. It's okay. You're human. It's all okay. So, I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that are in the news, as I mentioned before. So, one of the things in the news is about artificial sweeteners, and this is particularly about aspartame. Aspartame is also known as NutraSweet and Equal, and it's the number 951. When you look on the back of a can, of there's like 951, and there's a couple of variations of that. But anyway, so aspartame is kind of what's in uh, a lot of diet drinks. They will use aspartame. It's basically a sugar replacement. It's about 200 times sweeter than sugar. And it might be in sauces and mayonnaise and gums and basically anything that's sweet and labels itself as being low calorie or sugar free or whatever. Good chance it's got aspartame or it's got some other artificial sweetener in it. Now, aspartame for a long time, look, I've always been suspicious of aspartame because I've seen some weird things around it. So one is it's very habit forming. I find that people get more addicted to their kind of diet Cokes and Zeros and Pepsi Maxes and stuff than they even do to the regular kind. And I used to be quite, I'll say, habituated to Coca Cola at one time. But I see this as quite different. People get very, very attached to their diet drinks. They have a lot. They often have a lot. They have them all day, kind of thing. The other thing I see is that people do get. I've often seen people with neurological symptoms, so sort of brain symptoms, memory, and different things attached to aspartame. Like this is just me anecdotal. This is just me reporting on what people say and what I observe. That's all. Not saying that's any scientific evidence around that. But I've long been suspicious of it, and look, over the last few years, study has come out, and these studies are like associating aspartame with different health issues. Now, the word is association; it's not causation. In nutrition, it's very, very hard to say that thing causes that thing. It's because you're kind of observing people, and it's hard to come up with an exact that causes that. So I'm not saying that at all, but study after study, I think it was last year, there was a study came out and said that artificial sweeteners are not really helpful for losing weight, and that's really any artificial sweetener. So we kind of think of them as being the savior, and we have the diet drink and we'll lose weight, but not necessarily. And what we find is the artificial sweeteners, they do change your microbiome, kind of that gut bacteria in a negative way, as does sugar. So it's that whole we want to have no such thing as a free lunch, right? We somehow think that we're going to come up with a solution that allows us to get away with something. The truth is that sweet things are sweet things, and they're not all bad, and it's not that you can't have anything sweet. I enjoy my sugar just as much as the next person, but essentially is that all everything you eat, everything you consume has some effect, and it's actually just kind of figuring out what are the best things to consume, what nourishes you, what doesn't, and what are the things to keep to a minimum. And as it goes, sweet things are sweet things and they should be kept to a minimum. So whether you're talking about sugar or whether you're talking about artificial sweeteners, they all have challenges and they all can have negative outcomes. So what we don't do is we don't say, well, I understand that, drinking a can of Coke probably isn't super healthy, but I'm going to do it anyway. That's fine. You can do that. But then Diet Coke or Pepsi Max or something like that, Pepsi Max is double the caffeine. I think you need to know that. People don't realize that. So it's even got another challenge. Caffeine's a whole different story. Not talking about that today. But we kind of think, oh, well, then I can have 10 Diet Cokes or I can just drink that all day. I can treat it just like water. And no, you can't. It does have an effect. So we do know it has an effect on your microbiome, and it seems to affect, or at least have an association with things like diabetes and weight issues and metabolic syndrome. And last year, I think it might have been around September or something, a study did come out. And hang on, I've just got it here. Here it is. A study did come out, and what they found is that just have half a can of soft drink, so half a can of soft drink per day, diet soft drink. Uh, if you did that, you were 9% more likely to suffer from cardiovascular disease and 18% more likely to suffer from cerebrovascular disease, which is strokes, right? So brain stuff. So what they found is aspartame was linked to the biggest risk of stroke, right? So that was a study that came out last year. And like I said previously, there's been studies that have said that it messes with your microbiome. And look, a lot of association is, if you think about the fact that the people who are going to be drinking diet drinks are often people who have metabolic syndrome issues anyway. That's why they're drinking them. So you can't always say causation. But what I have noticed is, look, they don't seem to solve anything. I don't think they make it better. They don't help with weight loss. They don't help with any of those conditions. Uh, I understand that people who have diabetes, those kinds of issues, if they need to back off on how much sugar they're having, they might want to use an artificial sweetened product. I understand that. I'm just saying I don't think there's such a thing as free, and I think everything has consequences. And I think that some artificial sweeteners do affect your blood glucose levels as well, by the way. So you need to test and measure what works for you. So essentially, the latest study that did come out is that it's possibly carcinogenic, which is cancer causing. Now, it's again, it's an association, and the International Agency for Research on Cancer, who are a research arm of the World Health Organization, are saying that they're thinking about listing it as, I think it's they've got different levels of risk for cancer, and I think they've made it into, yeah, possibly carcinogenic. So not, there's possibly, probably, and I know there's a few different levels. So they're putting it, or it looks like they're putting it in the possibly carcinogenic list. So, my answer to that is, look, I don't have all the facts. I don't know exactly how your aspartame use is affecting you compared to someone else, And I'm not going to make your decisions for you. I would just say that I don't think it's something you should be having a whole lot of. I would say the same thing about sugar and say the same thing about a lot of other things. So I will just say that don't think of it as a health thing. It's not a health thing. And that's where I struggle to, is that people know that sugar is not a health thing. You're not having sugar because you think it's a health thing, but people are often having their diet products believing they are health food. They're not a health food. So sweet foods have an effect. What effect they have on you, how much is right for you, how much you should have, you need to assess that for yourself. Generally, in my opinion, though, it's a relatively low amount, and most people do best if the sweet thing they have is things like a bit of fruit. Now, I do sometimes have, use products that have artificial sweeteners in them, but I tend to go for ones that have kind of more natural as far artificial sweeteners, which would be things like monk fruit, it would be things like a bit of stevia, and although stevia does give you a bit of a aftertaste, which isn't so pleasant. And I will use things like maple syrup and honey in my cooking, or that kind of thing. And so I tend to use those more. Some people use a bit of rice malt syrup as well. Fine, but it is all sweet stuff, and sweet stuff all does have an effect on your body. So it's just about working out which ones sit better for you, work better for your health, work better for your blood glucose levels if you have those issues, but just not overdoing it. And I don't think we should overdo the diet stuff. And if you're having the diet stuff just because of the pure belief that you think it's healthier, it is not. And if they're putting in sweet stuff instead of natural, like, if it's ice cream, if ice cream naturally comes with fat in it and they're taking the fat out and putting an artificial sweetener in there, just have the one with fat in it. It's much better for you. You're going to get at least some nutrition there, right? So look, I think it's I think Cookie Monster, does Cookie Monster call them sometimes foods? I think we just have to acknowledge that some foods are sometimes foods, and that's okay. You decide which ones you have. You decide what level of risk you want to take. I'm not telling you that having a Diet Coke a day is going to give you cancer. I don't know. Who knows? And the truth is about a lot of those things is it's multifactorial. So it's lots of things, right? So if you have an otherwise healthy diet and lifestyle and you have the occasional Diet Coke and that makes you happy, good on you. But if you're having that along with your chips and chocolate and junk food and takeaway and you know lots of alcohol and you're not moving your body and yeah, that combination probably not so great, right? So you make your own decision. But my thing is just I think there's enough evidence to say they're not exactly healthy and they could be contributing to health issues. So don't treat them like a free health food. Treat them like something that you use sparingly. And if you are one of those people that is quite habituated to those foods, so if you're kind of, like I said, people get stuck on their Diet Cokes or whatever, the best way to, first of all, you can book a consultation with me for assistance. So don't forget that I can actually help you with these things. But my, what I don't ever do is I don't ever say, you have to stop that. You can't do that now. Now, some people do okay with that. Some people can go cold turkey with stuff and just stop doing it. And if you're one of those people, go for it, do it, good on you. But most people don't cope well with that. So, what I usually do is focus on getting people to eat a healthy, balanced diet. And there's other podcast episodes of mine you can listen to find out that, or go to my website or book a consultation so I can help you. But I find that when people are eating a healthy, balanced diet and not having too much of the sweet stuff, they lose their taste for the because 200 times sweeter these diet drinks, they lose their taste for it. Suddenly they start having the diet coke and go, oh, that's awful. So I find that when you look at other areas of your life and change other habits, it's something that you naturally change yourself, as opposed to me saying, whatever you do, you can't have it. Because for most people, the whatever you do, you can't have it thing doesn't really work for them. So, do what works for you. But just suddenly stopping doesn't always work for people. But creating healthy new habits and then bringing those in, that often just pushes out the habit that's not so good. Excuse me, just have a drink of water. So, my final topic for today, it's a bit of a tricky one. So, in the news this week has been discussions about whether or not doctors should have discussions with their patients around weight and weight loss. And I think this is a tricky one. I don't fall down on one side or the other. I think it's a nuanced conversation. I think I would start by saying a lot of doctors don't really know how to have these conversations with people, so there's a challenge there straight away. I will also say and acknowledge that in my personal experience, and I know the experience of a lot of the of my clients or patients or whatever, but people I've been seeing over the years, I know there are a lot of people that have some pretty traumatic experiences going to doctors. And I'm not having a go at all doctors or anything like that. This isn't about that. This is just a general discussion about my clients' experiences and some of my thoughts and feelings around this, not having a go at any profession at all. But I know that what happens a lot in my experience, particularly with women in general, I would say, but especially women who carry weight, is that sometimes, and it's not just doctors actually, because there can be nutritionists or dietitians or all different health professionals. So this is a bit of a thing with all health professionals, really, that we all are guilty of it or can be guilty of it. What can happen is people only see your weight and then don't see you. So, for starters, people see you as a whatever kilo person as opposed to a person who happens to be carrying weight, right? And what can happen is, I see this a lot is, and I think there has been some studies done on this. I don't have them in front of me, but people don't get diagnosed because the doctors don't listen to them. So a woman will go to the doctor and say, I've got this pain or this problem or this thing. And the doctor says, well, you've got to go and lose weight, go and lose weight. And while they may need to, and that might be beneficial for their health journey, it may be or may not be, that's another part of the conversation. They don't actually acknowledge that the person's got this pain and got this thing going on, and the thing that they've got going on might have nothing to do with their weight. Or even if it may have something to do with their weight, it still is something that needs to be addressed. So what happens is people are not being diagnosed and they're not wanting to go to the doctors. I have a lot of clients over the years who've come to me and they've told me some really, really serious symptoms, and I've had to send them to their GP, and they've been putting off going to the GP because they don't want to just get the weight talking to without the GP listening to them. And so things don't get diagnosed because people won't go to the doctors, and the doctors, instead of hearing what's going on for the person, they straight away say it's your weight, you've got to sort out your weight. And sometimes it's related, sometimes it's not. However, they're not being heard, sometimes not being diagnosed. And the other thing too is, look, the truth is, when you're carrying weight, and I know because my weight's been up and down my whole life and it's up more at the moment than I would like it to be, you're carrying weight. It's not like I need someone to tell me that I'm carrying weight at the moment. I am aware of it. It's funny how you are well aware of it when it's happening to you. So it's not like people need to be told that they're carrying weight. They usually know, and I think it is important that you listen to people. And the truth is that we blame weight for a lot of health problems, and it is associated with a lot of health problems. But some of them kind of can work both ways, as in, so, of course, if you were carrying a lot of weight and you're having knee problems, it would be fair to say that your weight is probably affecting your knees. absolutely, I understand that. So there are some situations where you can say, yeah, the extra pressure on your body is causing more wear and tear. Yes, absolutely, I understand that. But then there's things like where we talk about things like diabetes. And I would argue that, and I'm talking about type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, fatty liver, all of those things. And yes, weight contributes to those, but I would argue that the weight comes on because of the metabolic disorder. So it's part of the result of the metabolic disorder that you start having issues with insulin resistance and blood glucose management, and all of those issues start to happen. And the result of having those issues is that you gain weight, and then when you gain weight, of course, that contributes to the condition and might makes it worse and all the rest of it. So again, when you want to treat someone who has carrying weight but they have those metabolic syndrome issues, I would argue that you start trying to treat the metabolic syndrome from other angles, like getting the right nutrition, and making sure you have the right nutrients so that your cells recognize insulin, and you can repair that insulin resistance. And there's things that you can do that are not specifically about weight, or weight might be part of it, or a byproduct of doing it might be losing the weight, but it's not only about the weight. So I think that sometimes it we do sometimes medical professionals do have to have conversations with people around weight. Sometimes that is important, and I think the way you go about it is really important. And I think that doing it from a judgmental point of view, or just saying that every problem you have is caused by your weight, go and fix it, doesn't help anyone. Do you need to discuss it? Sometimes, yes, you do, and sometimes you need to discuss a health condition that might have driven the weight and work on there. Sometimes you might have to discuss, like, your knees are bad and that your weight is related to that. But always the discussions around weight, in my opinion, should be discussions around health. So the discussion should be around any health issue that is related to the weight, either driving the weight or caused by the weight. But it is the conversation is around health. Now, if someone's carrying a few extra kilos and they are perfectly healthy and they are perfectly happy, I don't see why you need to have that conversation. I don't see why it's an issue. So the health can come in many sizes. It doesn't come in every size, but it comes in many, many sizes. So my opinion is it's a nuanced thing. Yes, sometimes those discussions need to happen. When they do, how you have them is important, particularly with women compared to men. Sometimes, they used to use a shame thing, and I've heard some men say that shame works on men but not on women, and it probably does in some cases. But it certainly doesn't work on women. And I'm not saying I don't think it would work on most men either. And shaming people about something that's kind of really multifactorial, has lots of causes to it. I don't think ultimately helps people in the long run. So I don't think we can hide from weight and pretend it's not there and not have discussions and put pretty painting shingles over something and pretend it's not happening. I don't think ignoring something, if it is causing health issues, is helpful. But I also don't think treating someone like their weight and not a human being is helpful, or blaming everything on someone's weight and refusing to treat health first and then think about weight as sort of a byproduct of the health. I think it's a complicated topic, and I think there's nuance around it. And I think that, we should not ignore it, pretend it's not there. We should also not treat it like it's the only thing that's there. And I think that there's a middle ground somewhere in there, and I think it's different with different people. So anyway, that's my thoughts on it. I'd be happy to hear your thoughts as well. Please let me know. Give me your feedback. And anyway, I think that will be enough for today. I'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.